First one would be Mr. Tom LaBeouf.
He thinks I'm tall. I'm not.
Please just state your name and address for the record.
My name is Tom LaBeouf, or Thomas LaBeouf if you like, and I live on 1255 Holy Cross Drive in Monroeville.
Thank you.
Is that all you need?
That's it. You're up.
Okay. Good evening, and Dr. Short, the rest of the school board. I won't bother to try to go down and name everybody else, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk. Thank you for your willingness to reevaluate the current eligibility policy, and I'd like to make a couple of comments about that. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and for your willingness to listen to some input from some teachers, from some coaches in addressing this issue, something that didn't happen when it was put in. And I do hope that you'll have the courage to take it a step further and be positive agents for some change. I have to admit, as I was thinking a little bit about what to say tonight, I was just trying to figure a way to get your attention so that you wouldn't just be like some of my athletes or some of my former students and just kind of phase out as I talked. Because right now, some of you are probably thinking this is just another coach trying to figure out a way to get more kids eligible. And that's really not what this is about. It really isn't. I've never been in favor of this policy. Some of you know me, some of you don't. So I'm going to start by actually introducing myself a little bit to you. I taught here for almost 40 years in the English department at the high school. I've been coaching just as long. I've been coaching since I retired. I still miss teaching. It was my passion. And as I come before you this evening, it's not really about being a coach. It's about being an educator and about doing the things that are right for the kids. As I said, some of you think probably I'm just trying to figure a way to get some of the kids eligible or keep them eligible so that our program will do better. I've never been about program. The sports teams that I've coached have been very successful, but it has little to do with anything other than the fact that I'm passionate about the things that I do. And the kids that come know that they're going to work hard and that they're probably going to be successful, but it has little to do with me. If you asked me wins and losses, I really have no concern with that. I had to tabulate that when they asked me to do that a while back. I'm really here primarily as a teacher and as an educator. As I said, I taught here for about 40-odd years, almost 40 years, and my reputation here at that time was as a teacher as much as a coach. I would introduce myself every year at the beginning of the year to my students and remind them that I was first and foremost a teacher and secondarily a coach, and that they could expect me to spend most of my time teaching, not simply worrying about what was going on after school. My standards have always been high. I taught at every level, from the remedial levels to the general levels to the academic levels, and I know some of that's disappeared. And with the honors classes and the AP in the last 10 years or so, we're primarily with academic sophomores and with the honors seniors and with the AP seniors, and I'm really proud about some of the things that those kids accomplished. Those kids knew they had to work. It didn't matter whether they were at the remedial level or at the AP level. They had to work. They had to earn what they got. So this is not really about lowering standards. It's the furthest thing from the truth. It's about giving kids opportunities to succeed, and to succeed some places where they can't in some others along the way. As I said, I took great joy in helping students to develop their abilities to think, to speak, to write, to read, and gain an appreciation for the thoughts and writings of other people. But I took that same passion and joy to coaching. I always have. I coached cross country and track from the first year I was here. And then I coached junior high wrestling for 35 years as well. So not just at the high school level. I've always looked at all extracurricular activities, not just sports, but all extracurricular activities as another means of connecting with kids to help them develop into adults who would have a positive impact on their society, who would be good workers, good parents, good citizens, who could think and act independently while working cooperatively with others towards common goals. The reality is that sports and other extracurricular activities help us teachers and coaches connect with kids we could not reach in the classroom. And I saw that from the very beginning. I knew that as a student, but I knew that I could get the kids on the athletic field that I could not get to in the classroom. And then that would connect. Because some of those kids I connected to on the athletic field then had more motivation to stay eligible. I don't even remember when this policy was first put into effect. I just know that from my experience as a coach, I've watched our numbers drop, and many of it has to do with kids who gave up trying to stay eligible under the current policy. Not because they weren't trying, but they just couldn't do it. I know that we could look at stats and statistics, but look, if you're an average student and you're doing the best that you can, and the best that you can do is average, and I know that none of us want to think of our kids as average, but most people are average. My guess is that most of you in this room are somewhere average. I know I looked at myself as an average athlete. And I was pretty successful because I worked my tail off, but I was an average athlete. We fall into that category. But under the current system, if you're average and then you have a bad stretch, it's almost impossible to dig yourself out of the hole. And we've seen kids do it. There's no doubt we've done it. But I would look at the first 15, 20 years that I coached and watch kids who ended up being very, very successful at the college level academically, but who were really struggling here. They would never have survived under our current academic policy. And believe me, as a coach, I worked hard to try to make sure that the kids stressed academics first. I tell them that every year. You're struggling in the classroom, you do what it takes to get those grades up. You stay after school if necessary. You come late to practice, that's okay, get a signature. You show up late, we'll figure it out. But you take care of your academics. Not just so you can stay eligible, but that's the most important thing. Family, academics, sports, got to be that order. But some of these kids, there are probably half a dozen last year who were just under the 2.0. They could not get themselves eligible. A couple of those kids had just moved in. We'd like to think that everybody's on the same playing field. They're not. Some of our kids are really, really gifted academically. They don't even have to work to get good grades. I can look back at my high school career and I could say I fell into that category. My first 11 years of school, I did very little. I was proud of not taking books home. It didn't matter. I got good grades. I didn't have to work for it. My senior year, I decided to go to work, and I took every tough teacher here that I could, and I actually learned to be a student, which really helped me. You know what? Gateway is better than most of the districts in Pennsylvania. They're already better. Now, if they're already better, you now require your athletes and your kids in the band and cheerleaders and whoever else, whatever else they're doing, you ask them already in a school district that's better to perform better than other people and still participate. I don't really want to throw out the names of other school districts, but you have some other school districts where those kids who are struggling, they manage to stay eligible and they still participate. It motivates them to keep working to stay eligible. It's just a continuing cycle. And I've seen it happen. Look, we can look back. I can look at some of those guys in our Sports Hall of Fame who went on to successful careers in business, graduated with honors in college, a couple of them doctors and lawyers, and I have to admit, I don't think I'd let any of them operate on me, looking back. But nevertheless, look, what changed their lives? The opportunity to do things, and they found out that once they began to work in the classroom enough to stay eligible, sometimes they got interested in those classes they weren't interested in before.
Coach LaBeouf, please pardon my interruption.
That's all right.
I think I know exactly where you're going. Could you get to the part where you tell us what you think is the program or the policy that you are most comfortable with? Or
I honestly think that
the
what
kids?
the state says is good enough. I do that. There is an opportunity to fail. None of us here has gone into anything and not failed at some point for at least a little bit of time before we were successful. I think even if we are doing the same thing that the rest of the state is doing, we are not lowering academic standards. We are not doing that. We're already better. Look, I don't know how many times kids would come into my classroom from other districts, move into Gateway, whether it be from the city or move in from another state or even from some supposedly good schools. They would move into my classroom supposedly at the same level they were in those other schools, and guess what? They were struggling to keep their heads above the water. Sometimes we had to transfer them. I remember instances of taking kids that were put into an AP class. By the time they got to the second 9 weeks, they were in the general level because they couldn't make it here. And they were getting A's in the district they were in before, and it wasn't from the city. Where some of you were thinking, oh, it must have been the city schools. No, it wasn't from the city. It was from a well-reputed school district in the area. I'll just leave it at that. And I was surprised. They were surprised. They were working their tails off, and they couldn't get it done. Their skill level was not there. They didn't have the background to do it. And that's why I'm saying that. It's not a level playing field. It just isn't. We're better. And I say that with pride. I think we can always be better, but I don't think the answer is to have kids have to always be, those average kids always have to be at 100% of their best in order to continue to participate. That's where I was going with all of that. I just don't think it's an even playing field. We have kids with you know what, I think so many of us assume that all of the kids that come to Gateway, or most of them, have the same thing that we have. They've got a stable home. They've got economic advantages which allow them to be able to get on the net, for instance, to have a computer at home, to do whatever it takes. They've got parents who are supportive and help them whenever, or able to help them. And that just isn't the case. There are kids who are economically disadvantaged who have to work hours, and they're trying to do the sports stuff as well. Whatever it is, or the band, or, I hate to just use sports. That's where my area tends to be. But it's just not. And so they struggle and they struggle. And as I said, I've just seen so many kids give up. Now, some don't. But I can look at a couple of kids over the last 15 years who just gave up. They were successful on the track. They were working in the classroom, but they just couldn't get it up. And to be perfectly honest, sometimes all it takes is one teacher, how do I put this nicely, who has a problem with athletes, or who has a problem with one particular athlete. And that's all it takes for that kid to be ineligible under our current system. Under the state system, they have a chance to at least recover.
Coach, would you agree that there may be something between the state level
Yes.
and 2.0 that, you know, we've seemed to have reached this all or nothing point where it's either the PIA or Gateway's existing standard? And that's a loaded question.
It's a loaded question, but I think there's always a compromise available. You know, I would say go with the state standard, but there's always a compromise available. You know, some of you might want to say, well, you know what? You know what? One of the things that always bothers me, a kid could have one subject, he's struggling, and he's just an average student, but he's working his tail off. He's got all high C's, maybe even 1B. But he's really struggling, like the percentages don't come into play at all. 0 come into play at all. So let's just give the scenario where everybody, I don't know, you've got 6 major subjects, and he's got all C's, and they're all 78, 79, just barely below a B, but all it takes is 1D. Guess where he is? Ineligible. Guess where she is? Ineligible. It's just, to me, that's just not okay. It's just not okay. When I started coaching, the state system was different than it is now. It was 2 Fs. If you had 2 Fs, you were done in a major subject. So you were given a little bit of leeway. You could fail one subject and still be eligible, but that second one got you off of the eligibility. Somewhere along the line that changed, and I quit paying attention because our standard was different, and so we worked hard to try to get the kids to be able to meet that particular standard. You know, I'm not telling you guys really anything that you don't know about the state standards. I don't think I'm telling you anything about what athletics can do for people or what the band can do for people. I have such an appreciation for people like Dr. Reed, who I worked with for 30-odd years, or some of the other folks that are involved with the extracurricular activities. Those people are spending so much time with these kids, and most of them, I believe, feel very much like I do. That there's a problem, there's something that's not quite right with the system, and it needs to be fixed. So is there a middle ground? There's always a middle ground. I don't know exactly what that is. Like I said, I would take the simple solution. It's not lowering standards. Not from my point of view anyways, not lowering standards. Let me see if there's anything critical. I know that sometimes I can wax kind of long, and Dr. Short is smiling because he's been...
I've seen that act before.
Yeah, I know. Let's just put it this way. I think under the current standard, the kids are the ones who tend to be the losers. What was the statistic I saw? 20% of our student body is below a 2.0.
High school.
20%? Folks, that means some kids quit trying. And I've seen it with the kids who've been out for athletics. It's not just for athletics or the band or anybody else. They've quit trying because they just can't do it. I would wager, I don't know the statistics, but I would wager that in that first 15, 20 years that I taught here, that it wasn't anywhere near 20% who were below a 2.0. Now, you could say, well, maybe the demographics have changed, maybe this is, I don't think that's the case at all. I told you, I taught remedial kids. Those kids will work if you give them the right motivation. Those kids can accomplish but they've got to have the skill set, and you've got to give them the skill set. And it takes time to make the changes. So I think we need to give them a little bit of leeway, is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, Mr. LaBeouf.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for listening.
Thanks.
Mr. Ivy.
Hey, Scotty, before Mr. Ivy speaks, I just want to just give some additional information that would help the audience with some of Mr. LaBeouf's questions. The 2.0 policy was adopted by Gateway in 1997, and then that policy, which we can show later, we have it, it was pretty simple. It was basically you have to have a 2.0 to play. And then it was adjusted in 2002, 2003 school year to become a little more detailed and more stringent at that point, and that's the policy that should be up on the board now, which is still the current policy, which is what we're discussing tonight. That helps.
Good evening.
Please state your name and address for the record, sir.
Morty G. Ivy, 103 Orchard Street, Monroeville, 15146. I can concur. I concur with our athletic department, but I also want to just make a statement. We need to keep our children first and foremost at heart. Not thinking that we are lowering the standards, but we can help children. If you leave one child behind, then Gateway is behind. So we need to reach out for all our children. We need to work for them, even if we have to go back to the year 2013 where we had mandatory study hall, things where we helped our children. If you don't help them, they're already destined to fail. I saw you, I came to you, and I saw the program that you had. You brought in an equity coordinator, Dr. Woods, who is now the principal at Woodland Hills High School full-time. How is he helping our children? How are you helping our children? I'm a parent. I'm a taxpayer first. I'm a parent. Yes, I'm the father of a coach, but I'm concerned with every child still, even after I've retired in this school. Those that know me can tell you from the beginning that every child that I came in contact was like mine. All I want you to do is forget about the petty stuff that happened before, the past, and let's build now for our children for tomorrow. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ivy.
Carrie? Yep.
I'm giving her some of my time.
I don't need any extra time.
You have to lower the mic now.
Just like this? Okay. So what do I say? My name, Carrie Kunich, 2339 Saunders Station Road,
You're good.
Monroeville, PA. Okay, so I wrote because I don't like to just skip around. I like to get to the point. So over the last couple weeks, I've been reading a lot of posts on Facebook, and I feel like I have a lot of the same thoughts that Tom LaBeouf had. I really want to just put my kind of insight, foremost as a parent, also a teacher and a coach. I'm a parent of a 2017 grad, a 12th grader, an 8th grader, and a 4th grader. I'm extremely tough on my children, both academically, socially, behaviorally, and in their sports. So far, I think it's paid off. I can't really say that my methods or anything you'd find in a parenting book, but they've worked. As far as my kids going through the high school with the two boys, again, an excellent education at the high school. I want to kind of talk about what Tom said about our standards already being so much higher, so I think that has an even higher effect on the GPA. So my oldest, who's now a sophomore in college, said that the kids up at IUP said the college is so hard. He said it's not. He got a 4.0. He'd never got a 4.0 at Gateway, ever. He's like, it's so easy compared to Gateway. So that speaks volumes right there. The other issue I see is that can really affect GPA, and I don't want to throw Jordan under the bus, but he's turned out to be a very successful, he's at IUP on a ROTC scholarship, so he turned out okay after his major falter. But what happened his freshman year, which is part of the way we calculate GPA, which I don't think all districts do it. I did talk to a girl from Penn Trafford today. So we make so the final grade for the year, 10% of the final exam is figured into that. So Jordan was coasting along, thinking he was doing pretty good all year, his freshman year. He had a B in 2 classes. Specifically, I remember it was Spanish and English. So he thought he was going to get a B in there for the year. So he didn't take that final very seriously, being a freshman. He still would have been eligible, but it was not a pretty sight where he had to dig out of after his freshman year. And I don't think that, again, makes it even harder to keep your GPA. I wonder how many kids get themselves in that situation. This was a child who had a B all year in a class, and his final grade for the year in that class, in 2 classes, was a C, which gave him 2 2.0s computed into his grade point average. So we had to spend the next 4 years, I say we because I was all over him for it, digging out of that hole. It was a major hole to dig out of. So my point is, even using the PIA standards, it's much harder, just like Tom said, at Gateway than it is a lot of other places. I hear it over and over, and I just think the examples I gave there with my own children, are the same thing. Many comments that I've read on social media seem to revolve around high school athletes playing sports in college and getting scholarships. I'm really not sure that's why most of the kids play sports. Being a coach, I've seen the positive impact playing has on the players, even the bench players. I want to hold them accountable, I do. I've had players and managers get in trouble at school. Okay, you missed this away game, but you can come to the next one. I feel like with kids, we always have to give them a chance to quickly redeem themselves, because long-term doesn't mean anything. I think that's where the quitting comes into play and not wanting to try. To me, when a student is ineligible and they're running the streets or just sitting at home, there's no chance for them to have a positive impact from a coach or the chance to feel part of a team and be influenced by their peers. Which brings me back to the point that every child does not have parents at home to provide the support needed. I would much rather see more kids in the gym, on the field, on a stage, and not running the streets. So many students, not just athletes, need our support, as Mr. Ivey said. We need more ways to help these kids. I think when I stood here 2 years ago, I said we have no math lab, we have no writing lab, we have no activity bus, and we have lack of after-school tutoring programs to help these students. I know there's some kids who are never going to take advantage of that. I get that. I'd like to see everybody succeed, but in a perfect world, that doesn't happen. So my things that I think we need to consider is, why are we holding kids that want to be involved to a higher standard than those that don't want to participate? Why is it okay to graduate with a 1.0, but we're not okay with the PIA standard? Some students are going to make many mistakes, but we need to be there to support them and support the kids not involved and the kids involved. Some kids take much longer than others to figure it out. I can't see a winner here if we prevent more kids from participating. We take away everything high school is about. Think back to all the mistakes we made in high school. No, you don't have to share them. But think of the coaches, the mentors that helped you overcome those mistakes. I'm in favor of more academic support and keeping more kids involved. I've witnessed the impact it has, and I understand you probably don't all agree, but I've seen it every day for 22 years, and I feel like they're not all on an even playing field, so we really need to think about how we can help them. That's it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Janet Kelly.
Janet Kelly, 707 Millbury Road, Monroeville, and I'm also speaking on the 2.0 policy. I'm also going to speak on behalf, I'm going to read a letter from Nancy Gormley, 607 Greenleaf Drive, who was unable to be here. I would like to say thank you to Coach LaBeouf. He had all three of my kids, and I can attest to the fact that he was a very demanding teacher, as well as a very demanding coach. But I'm going to speak a little bit on the opposite side to an extent. But anyway, let me start by reading Nancy's letter. Dear members of the Gateway School Board, I would like to urge you all to vote no to the board resolution to suspend Board Policy 122.1 regarding educational requirements to participate in athletic activities in the Gateway School District. At a recent board meeting, Ms. Warning cited the following reasons for the suspension of this policy. I will address her points individually. To align, quote, to align with the other surrounding areas and districts, unquote. For what purpose do we need to align with neighboring districts? We are not in a competitive situation for recruiting athletes. And shouldn't we be in the position of being a leader in our community rather than lowering our standards to match those of our lower performing neighbors? A school district with strong academic achievement will entice people to move to Monroeville and Pitcairn and will strengthen our tax base, making more dollars available for the education of our children. Quote, give more students the opportunity to participate in activities that can have a positive, dramatic effect on their education, unquote. This certainly will provide more students the ability to participate in athletics, but will have a counter effect on their education. If you want the student to be well-versed in which plays to run in which sporting situation, this policy is for you. If you want the students to learn that hard work will pay off in rewards with immediate consequences, parentheses, the ability to participate in athletics, and long-term gains, parentheses, being prepared for life as a self-sufficient adult, suspending this policy is not the route to take. Quote, provide necessary motivation and structure many struggle to find, unquote. What could be more motivating to a student who wants to play a sport than a required GPA that takes more effort than simply showing up for class? These children are not going to graduate and get a job where their supervisor lowers the requirements of the position because the employee doesn't want to work hard for his or her paycheck. But that's what lowering the standards is teaching them. And what more structure can there be than having to go to school each day with a scheduled educational plan and attend special tutoring programs designed to help them succeed? Why do children go to school? One of the main reasons is to prepare them for adulthood. While not every student will go to college, each of these children hope to grow into adults who can support themselves. They want to live on their own and buy things, but the adult world isn't easy. No one is going to coddle these students turned to workers. They will need to have an ability to read, write, and to do mathematics. I can't imagine why anyone tasked with responsibility of educating students would choose to lower standards. What message is this sending to our students? Do you want to be the board member who is saying to the students of the Gateway School District, quote, we know you aren't capable of succeeding in the classroom, so at least we'll let you play sports while you're killing time in the Gateway School District, unquote. Because lowering these standards to those of the PIAA is saying just that. You're telling them that they are incapable of succeeding in the classroom, and that's a heartbreaking message to send. Again, I implore you to say no to the resolution to suspend this policy. Nancy Gormley, Monroeville resident and proud parent of 2 Gateway Athletics alumni. And then also, I would like to also encourage you, I think, in my opinion, it's a disservice to this, lowering the GPA requirement is a disservice to the school district. I'm concerned that lowering the GPA requirement may result in lower test scores because students would no longer find it necessary to achieve a 2.0 average since it's no longer an eligibility requirement. Lower academic performance will then impact state test scores as well as SAT scores, lowering the average rating for the district. Lowering the GPA requirement is also sending an inappropriate message to all students. It's sending a message that participating in sports or extracurricular activities is more important than academic performance. That is not the message the district should be sending to the students. I think it's a disservice to the teachers. If students participating in sports or extracurricular activities are no longer required to achieve a 2.0 average, then many students will no longer be motivated to achieve that goal. That will make the teacher's job more difficult in motivating the students to achieve. Teachers then have a more difficult battle to have their students perform at an expected level on state tests when they're not expected to meet a reasonably stringent level of performance in the classroom. It's a disservice to the parents. For the parents who are concerned about the academic performance of their children, they will end up fighting a battle with their children regarding academic performance that the school district is condoning, namely lower expectations. How's a parent going to overcome their child's argument that the performance is acceptable to the school district for them to participate, so why isn't it acceptable to the parent? And finally, and most importantly, I think it's a disservice to the students. The job of a school was to educate the students. Sports and extracurricular activities are amenities to add to the school experience as well as the overall development of students. A school district is selling its students short when it determines that lower expectations are necessary because some students are not motivated enough to put forth the effort to achieve a C, but they would be motivated if all they needed to achieve was a D. As a math teacher, I guarantee you that achieving a D in Algebra 1 will make the students and the teacher's job much more difficult even to achieve a D in Algebra 2. It will make it unlikely that the student will be proficient on the Algebra Keystone exam and hinder the student's performance on the math section of the SAT. Currently, Gateway is ranked 41 out of 491 school districts for best school districts for your buck in Pennsylvania, based on 2015 data. And that's from NerdWallet. Sports were not even a consideration for this ranking. In addition, Gateway School District received a B+ rating, and more specifically, Gateway High School received an A- rating in NICH's 2019 Best Schools Report. I believe the current GPA requirement positively impact those ratings, and that lowering the GPA requirement will negatively impact them. I believe this because I believe that lowering the GPA requirement will also lower the motivation of some students who maintain that GPA because they need it to participate in sports or extracurricular activities. It will not just be the currently struggling student who will then be eligible to participate by achieving a D, but it will be the students who are motivated to achieve that C to be eligible who will then be able to slack off and achieve a D and still participate. But that doesn't mean that the coaches, the teachers, the administration shouldn't care about the struggling students, students who are struggling to meet the GPA requirement for eligibility in sports. I do not believe that lowering the GPA requirement is the appropriate response to these students. I believe that tutoring should be provided to assist these students in the class or classes in which they're struggling. If they truly want to participate in sports, they should be encouraged to participate in tutoring, whether it be by a teacher or perhaps a National Honor Society student. Perhaps that little bit of extra attention will motivate that needy student to achieve to the necessary level. I'll not read the rest. But I will say, I mean, I agree with some of the points that they were making as well. I think just flat out dropping the policy is not the way to go, possibly revising the policy. I agree with freshmen, maybe, because even in college, for scholarships, for example, there's usually a lower GPA requirement for a freshman going to their sophomore year to maintain a scholarship than it is for like a sophomore going to a junior or a junior going to a senior. So I agree that there are people, ninth graders in particular, that have to adjust to college, just like the first year of college is an adjustment for students. And so perhaps there should be something that might be taken into consideration. I don't think just flat out saying we no longer have a policy, let's just drop it altogether. I personally don't think that's the way to go, because I think that will cause, I think there'll be fallback from that as well. I definitely think we should be helping those ones that are struggling. Our job is to educate. Isn't there something that we can do to not just make sure they can participate in sports, but to make sure they're getting the education that they need so that when they graduate, they have the skills that they need? Anyway, I don't think just flat out dropping the policy is the way to go. That's my personal opinion. I think there's going to be ramifications to that in a lot of different areas. But I definitely think that there's room for improvement. Like I said, you might want to consider, I think, the scholarship thing, freshmen in high school or freshmen in college, rising sophomores have a lower GPA requirement to keep their scholarship. It goes up as you go up the ladder. You might want to do something like that, like think a little bit differently from freshmen, something you might want to consider. But anyway, I'm beyond my time, but
Thank you.
I just wanted to.
Dawn Hall.
Hi, my name is Don Hall. I'm the current football coach here at Gateway. Good evening, Dr. Short and members of the school board. A couple thoughts. different perspective from Tom. You know, I've coached a number of places. I've been a number of high schools. I've been a collegiate coach. I've recruited student athletes. I've taught in the classroom for almost 20 years as well. So I'm a teacher, a parent of some college athletes, and 5 children of my own that have graduated from high school and attended college. Different perspective coming in from, you know, Tom had a career as a student and a teacher here, and some others have mentioned it. One of my favorite quotes is by G.K. Chesterton, and it's, you know, when you come into a new situation, never tear down a fence until you know why it was put up in the first place. So I think as a sort of a new CEO, fresh set of eyes, sort of, we've all been in that situation where you come into a situation and you say, okay, why are we doing what we're doing? And you kind of look at it first before you make any rash changes or sudden knee-jerk reactions to what's going on. So through the time I've been here, going into my 3rd year, I've looked at a lot of different things that go on at Gateway, and certainly from a new perspective, a fresh set of eyes, if you will. And one that always, to me, had a huge disconnect from places I've been, again, multiple high schools and college as well, as a student athlete in college and as a coach in college, is this eligibility policy. Basically, what we're talking about, the fundamental disconnect is, you know, let's talk about my collegiate experience. I went to the United States Naval Academy. The Naval Academy, we had on our rings, 2.0 and go. You know, you needed a 2.0 to graduate from the Naval Academy. What's the Naval Academy? It's a highly selective, I'd like to call it an elite academic institution, very difficult to achieve that 2.0 in college. And with that 2.0, you have selective admission, you have expected and even desired attrition. You want to make it so everybody can't make it through that place. And ultimately, you need a 2.0 to graduate. So it makes sense that if you want to participate there, you need a 2.0. You need to continue to reach that level. And that 2.0 will also get you your diploma and your commission in the military service. A public school district, and now I'm clearly talking about Gateway, it's not selective. You know, we're going to educate every young person who comes through the door. We're going to take every ability level. We want everyone to graduate. We don't want students to fail. Attrition is totally undesirable. We want everybody to make it all the way through if we can, whether that's realistic or not. You need a 1.0 to graduate. You have to pass. I'm a regular social studies teacher, a history teacher at Seneca Valley School District. I teach some students in regular education, and I know from coaching and teaching, you have different ability levels, different ceilings, different expectations. As a coach and as a teacher, sometimes a student who passes or a player who finds a way to make a team, that's worthy of a celebration. We're talking about, as Tom had mentioned, there's a lot of students who don't have a lot of advantages, don't have the ability to do certain things, whether it be as in whatever field they're in, and we're celebrating when they reach their ceiling or their expectation level. Again, it's a win. I'll get back to that in a minute. I've mentioned I've been other places, so specifically speaking of the Gateway policy. It's more stringent than any place I've ever coached as a high school coach. I coached at a place called Tunkhannock area in the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton area. I coached at Seneca Valley, as I mentioned. I've also coached at Erie Cathedral Prep, which is a private Catholic school in Erie. This one supersedes all of those places. It's by far the most stringent and by far has the most ineligible students of any place I've ever been. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think if you transposed our policy on any place else I've been, all you'd have is that other place would have a lot more ineligible students than Gateway does when you flip them around. And why is that? Well, let's talk about Cathedral Prep, for instance. Considered a private school. Hopefully you're getting a good education for your dollar there. They have an entrance exam. They have selective admission. They have selective retention. If they don't want you there, they can kick you out. If you don't perform, they can make you go away. The policy there is of the philosophy that you can serve both masters. You can be very serious about academics and still do right by the student. There, and we talked about some compromises potentially, there they say, look, you're going to basically, you can, if you're failing one class, you're still eligible. When you fail a second one, you have 5 days to remediate that and try to get eligible again, get one of those grades back up to a D. And if you do, you're still eligible. And if you don't, you're out for a week. That's pretty close to the PIAA policy. The one thing that I was going to talk about here, in addition, in comparing all of them, is the standard bell curve. And I'm a football coach, and I actually asked Bob Brown earlier if I could get a a marker and draw a bell curve on that board. I probably was going to start drawing a play for you guys to look at and evaluate, but my point is, I won't go draw the bell curve. But if you're familiar with the standard bell curve and you look at it as it relates to grading, the middle of that thing is a C plus, C minus. And on the right side of that thing are 34% C, 14% B, 2% A. And on the left is the same. 34% C minus, okay, 14% D, 2% F. When we run 11 guys out on the football field, if 10 of them know what to do, I feel like, okay, well, maybe one guy just doesn't get it. I mean, I jokingly say, and I'm a Catholic, and I hope I don't get struck by lightning, even Jesus Christ himself only got 11 out of 12. So I understand that you're not always going to get everybody on the same page. And there are 2% that are going to fail, okay? But it shouldn't be 50%. I mean, a C minus and below, you're ineligible at Gateway. That's unbelievable for a public school district who has to educate every child who walks in the door, in my estimation. So again, that kind of condenses the whole bell curve discussion, but I wanted to make sure. So back to GK Chesterton. You know, why was that fence put up in the first place? I don't know. I don't know if it was an answer to students moving in that didn't have high standards. I don't know if we had a particularly high achieving population at the time and that demographic has changed. I'm not sure the genesis in 1997 or the revisit in 2002, but I know that I've been a lot of places where when you compare those things, they're not equitable with other students in other school districts that are competing and succeeding in all different walks of extracurricular activity. Lastly, we hear a lot of discussion about what does it take to be eligible to be a college athlete. And we say, well, they need the 2.3 and they need the sliding scale and the test grade. But I have 3 sons one that graduated and 2 that currently play college football. One's at Colgate. Colgate's a pretty prestigious academic institution as well. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of him. And basically there, as a collegiate athlete, you need to be scheduled. You need to take 12 hours of classes per semester and be passing 6 to be eligible to continue to play a sport in college at a place like Colgate. So I'm not saying that, that's a wonderful scenario that you wouldn't pass all your classes or anything like that, but we're talking about prestigious collegiate athletic or institutions, academic institutions that have a standard like that across the NCAA. So people get mired in this idea that you got to have this higher than average grade point average to get to college and to stay in college and play. And the last thing I would say is I think the description or the characterization of this idea as lowering the standard is just a misrepresentation. We're talking about taking a standard that is completely mismatched with a public school district and putting it at an equitable level for a public school district. We're not talking about taking it and saying we're going to throw out the PIAA and we're going to operate in some netherworld that's far below any minimum that's out there and ask our kids not to succeed. We're just basically putting it in a congruent situation with a public school district in 2018. I thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Anybody else that wishes to address on agenda items? Cindy?
While Cindy's coming up, Mr. Rovesti, you're the athletic director here. You may not have been planning to speak, but I value your input, and if you would have some thoughts for us, if you could put those together, I'd like to hear them. Because we're trying to divide the baby. Should it be athletics or should it be academics? You have some experience here that might help us when we make our decision, okay?
Go ahead, Ms. Lucas.
My name is Cindy Lucas. I live on Ramsey Road in Monroeville. And I am here also to speak on the 2.0 grade point average. And I'm going to start with our coaches, what they had to say before I came up. And I would like to say that, Mr. LaBeouf, about the time you started at Gateway was roughly about the time I graduated from Gateway. And at that time, our grade point average was 94 to 100 was an A, 87 to 93 was a B, and 75 to 87 was a C. I graduated with 770 students. Mr. Pete Annamarino, Coach Annamarino, was the football coach at that time. At that time, he was the only football coach that had won a WPIAL Quad 4 championship title, and our football teams were quite large. So somehow or other, they managed to be eligible. It's hard for me to be here. I can't believe I'm here after all these years, but because I was part of, I guess, hard to believe, that group in 1997 that wanted the 2.0 grade point average, and that's what first ignited my interest in the school board, even though I am a Gateway graduate. I can't stress enough how strongly I believe that our first responsibility is to the education of our children. It's one of the reasons why when I got married and decided to raise a family, I came back to Gateway. I am the proud parent of 2 soon-to-be 30-year-old children who were both athletes. My son played 4 years of college soccer at Case Western Reserve. He's now a physician. My daughter has her doctorate. They managed, and I know we are on one end of the spectrum, and I'm not saying anything about the other end of the spectrum. However, all that being said, I think we need tools in place to help those students at the other end of the spectrum. And I know when Terry Smith was here, and he was the coach and the athletic director, those kids went to study halls before they played football. And they went to study halls before they practiced. And Terry Smith was a Penn State graduate, so he knows. And Paterno only recruited those individuals who had a decent grade point average. I think, and it's been said before, we do a tremendous disservice to our children if we don't expect higher than a 0.55. I think we do a disservice to our community when we say, this is fine, this is all we need. Why can't we strive to be the best? What's wrong with expecting more than average? What's wrong with being stringent in a day and an age where we need that? And I know so well that everyone doesn't come from the same background, and everyone isn't afforded the same opportunities. But what we can afford them here is a quality education. And we can know that the kids leave here with a quality education to make them successful in wherever they go and whatever they do. And I am extremely passionate about this. I'm extremely passionate about teaching. I have the utmost respect for the profession. And I think as a board, as a community of athletes, teachers, we owe it to our children to expect more. And as Janet said, compromise, sure, compromise is always a good thing. But to go from a 2.0 to a 0.55, I think is just incomprehensible to me. So that's really all I have to say, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good, that's it. I'm glad I have it in my fridge. Sir? Or did somebody else see?
I'll make this fast, but also, as Cindy, I'm a Gateway graduate. My name is Cheryl Boyce. I live in Point Circle in Monroeville. I have 2 kids that played sports here and also did very well in Gateway. Here's the thing, the coach left, so I can't answer his question. What happened in that time frame? It's called the state got tired of hearing the excuses why kids weren't succeeding academically. It's called college and workforce readiness. It's called the Keystone exams. It's called the PSSA. Those things didn't exist when I was in school. They didn't exist when Cindy was in school. They were put in place because, and this is a banner in the Penn State Museum. It's not about academic excellence. It's about the next 30 years of their life. And they can't see beyond Friday as a teenager. But your job, and somehow you've got to do it, and you've got to make a compromise. I've read the NCAA regulations. I've read the PIAA regulations. I know more about the Keystone exams than I want to, and I don't like them. But you're making a case for keeping them and making them a graduation requirements. And for the parents that are sitting here, the state wants to make that a requirement. And if your kids can't pass those tests, then they don't get to graduate. So you better be worried, because they're looking at you and they're saying, when these kids walk out the door, and if they want to go to tech school, and we've got kids coming in there that can't measure with a tape measure, a quarter of an inch, we don't want them. So yes, my kids were athletes. And you know what? They didn't play one game a week on a Friday night and had the weekend to recuperate. They played several times during the week. They didn't get off the bus until 10 o'clock at night some nights, and they had to be in class in the next morning. We can't make excuses. You've got to look at this from a couple different perspectives. Yes, this motivates kids. Yes, there's kids that this will help them. I get that. But the state and the people of the powers to be, and administration knows this, are putting things in place because they don't want to hear these excuses anymore. Because employers are upset, colleges are sick and tired of getting kids in there that can't graduate. And you know what? I feel like after listening to this, I'm going to write the Department of Ed and saying, even though I have said for the last 5 years, I don't like the Keystones, maybe we need them. Maybe these kids need to fail these tests, and maybe everyone will get the message that this is serious. They have got to do something. A 0.5 is not acceptable. A 1.0 is not acceptable. That's not average. A C minus 2.0 is average. That's not average. So the state and the PIAA are not on the same page, folks. They haven't been for a long time. And this has been brought to the attention of those powers to be in Harrisburg, that you have a problem with the PIAA regulations and what you're promoting. So I don't know. All I know is I've heard nonstop, we can't let these kids come out without basic skills, without some form of mastery and some basic level. So you have to figure it out. You lower it, I want to see what the scores are going to be like. You know, how many kids are we talking about? What do the scores look like after this happens? Because parents don't get what the state's trying to say, because they don't know that. They're not in that network. They don't get that. They only see what's in front of them. But they have to understand, people are watching you. And you know that. Every move a district makes, they're watching you to see what you're doing. And they're making changes accordingly because they want these kids to do better. And in too many cases, they aren't.
Thank you.
I'm Jim Kelly, 707 Bilberry Drive, Monroeville. I didn't come to the meeting intending to speak, but listening to Coach LaBeouf, he mentioned an issue that has been an issue in my mind for years, something that didn't make sense. It was also mentioned by another speaker, and it was about a student who had a number of high C's and then a D, made them ineligible. I'm going to open up a can of worms. Maybe look at it, thinking outside the box. What we do in the grading system is we take very precise measurements. You have a 79.49, and you have a C. You have a 79.51, and you have a B. So we take that 79.49 and we make it 2.0. And we take that other one, we make it a 3.0. I'm inventing a word. You crudify a very precise measurement. And then, at the end of the student's academic career, you take all of these very crude measurements, you add them all together and you divide them up to the thousandth of a point, and you get very precise measurements again. This doesn't make sense. It made sense in the 19th century and the 20th century before computers. It doesn't make sense now. Why do we do this? Okay? Now this might only be a part of the solution, if compromised, whatever, to change the grading system. So a 79 wouldn't be a 2.0. Maybe it would be a 2.9. Why do we have to do it? Because we've always done it that way. Nobody does it this way. Think outside the box. Think what makes sense. I'm done. Thank you.
Nicely done.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else wish to address the board on agenda items?
Dan Alexander, 407 Rivera Drive, Monroeville. I wasn't intending to speak tonight or anything like that, but I'm listening to my fellow coaches and concerned parents and all that. As most of you know, I have kids in the district. I have kids that graduated from here, and me and my wife are very, very strict when it comes to academics. Gateway has provided an exceptional education, so much so that my son Jason was able to get practically a full academic scholarship to WVU. And going along with what Carrie said, he agrees that when he's taking chemical engineering, a tough class, he's got a 4.0, he's starting his junior year, and he says what he learned at Gateway has helped him because it's made his classes at WVU easier. So it is a lot more strict here at Gateway. That having been said, as a parent, as a coach, I see a lot of these kids come out and they're struggling. Like Coach LaBeouf said, they're struggling. Okay, they're trying. I was one of those kids. I'm a product of the Pittsburgh School District, and I would have been academically ineligible. Trust me. Had 1.0 in math. Okay, so, and it wasn't because I couldn't get it. It was just I didn't care. I just wanted to skate through. It wasn't until I went to college that I finally kicked in and I did well. But my point is, some of these kids that you see out, I've been coaching for 11 years of various sports, some of these kids you see out on the field don't have great home lives, okay? They don't have parents who care, parents who sit down at night and go over things with them, who they basically say, did you do your homework? Yeah, okay, that's it, if they get that, okay? So they're like me. My parents did help me in that and forced me, I just, didn't listen. But they just skate through, okay? They don't have a reason to. The 2.0, I can see both sides of the argument. I can see the kids wanting to, you want these kids to be involved in band, to be involved in sports. My kids are involved in sports. They're involved in band. And it's their way of being a part of something because they might not have the home life or that they can feel they're a part of something that can succeed. Even kids who are shy join, say, the football team, okay? All of a sudden they start making friends, they're a part of something, they feel better about themselves, they do better. So you want to give your kids every opportunity to play sports, to play extracurricular activities. However, at least for me, academics has to come first because, let's face it, most of these kids ain't going to be professional musicians. Most of these kids ain't going to be professional athletes. They will be out in the workforce. Okay, so they will have to go college or trade or something like that, but they're going to have to succeed, all right? So to do that, I mean, they're going to need to keep their grades up. That having been said, it is up to this board, if you decide to keep the 2.0 requirement, to provide them with the opportunity to succeed, meaning tutoring, bring back the math lab, bring back, reading. Tutoring classes, and I know that's really hard right now for you guys thanks to the Monroeville tax debacle, that you guys are really strict on the budget right now because you'd have to pay teachers and tutors and all that, okay, to stay after and help these kids. A suggestion to do is instead of making them ineligible, if they don't make the 2.0, if they're failing one class or two classes, whatever it is, and they don't make the 2.0, don't make them ineligible to play the sport right away. Put them on probation. They can play the sport, okay? But they have to attend the tutoring once or twice a week in, say, math, whatever class they're failing in. They'd have to attend it, and they'd have to get a signature and have to show the coach, yes, I attended, here's the signature. The coaching staff would have to be supportive. If they need to miss a practice because of a test coming up, then we allow them to miss that practice, okay? To help them get them. So we'd have to support them and help them and encourage them to do well, and it would be up to you guys to provide the means with tutoring and stuff like that to do well. So you put them on probation, they can still play the sports, they can still be part of the team with the understanding that they have to go to tutoring and they have to signature. We support them, you guys support them, and we help get this kid up. And if he doesn't want to be bothered or something like that, he doesn't go to tutoring and that, well then I guess he really doesn't want to be a part of the band. He really doesn't want to be part of the football team or whatever, okay? And that's just how it's going to be, you know. But if he really wants to, and we provide the means, and we provide the support, and we provide the encouragement as coaches and as, you know, school district, then we help him to succeed. He brings his grade up. Everybody's happy. He feels better because he starts succeeding. He's still part of the team. He's still part of the group. And he's getting something that they're probably not getting at home, which is help. So, but it's up to you guys, and I don't envy you because you got to figure out a way with the budget and everything to make it happen. But you do got to bring back things like the math lab and stuff. Give these kids the opportunity. If you're going to give the stringent and say you got to get your grades up, you got to give them a path to get the grades up. That's it.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to address this board? Hold on, Jen.
Hello, my name is Dino Lotito. I live at 401 College Park Drive, Monroeville. I'm going into my senior year this year. To be honest, the only reason I'm here tonight is I had to come to a meeting for a Boy Scout requirement. I did know that you were speaking on the GPA tonight because my sister follows you guys on what you speak on. I would like to speak a bit about being a student and participating in multiple academic areas. My 8th grade and freshman year, I did participate in the Gateway Band. And then my sophomore year, I participated in the Gateway Lacrosse, coached by Mr. Alexander. The 2.0, in my opinion, is a bit strict. I would like to say myself, I have a condition, dyslexia. It's a bit of a trouble to read and write for me, so I do struggle in my English classes. In other classes where you have to form essays and argue points are not my strong point. Last year, I only finished the year with a 2.3, which is meeting the requirements, but I did fail my English class. I don't strive in English, having that disability. The only reason I can keep my grades high as I can, I do participate in band. I'm a musician. I've played many instruments since I was a young boy. I strive in math and science. I got a 98 in my science class last year. But people like me that have this problem and don't have the advantages that I have, such as being a musician and being able to take band and get that high A, that 98%, or being good at math and being able to get the high percent in that math and science department. We really struggle because we love to participate in these activities. I see other friends that have similar disabilities as me in band who struggle to keep their grades up, who have to work so hard to keep it at that level, even dropping below sometimes and getting that kicked out of this thing they love to do, such as band or another academic after-school program. I think that maybe lowering it all the way down to a 0.5 is a little bit of a drop, but there needs to be some kind of help for students such as myself. I do have support aides in school in classes like English, but it's not always about that. They help me in class, but I can't always get the help outside of school at my house when I'm forming an essay or writing a paper to argue something. I can't form those correct sentences. I mean, I get the aid, I appreciate it in class, but at home it's a little bit harder, especially because dyslexia can be genetic, and yes, my mother has dyslexia, and my father does not have the best English being from South America. So I do find the 2.0 a little bit much as a requirement because I do love to play these sports as well, to be involved in other after-school activities. So I would like to ask you all to consider lowering the 2.0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jeanette Beagle. I live in Wiltshire Circle in Monroeville. And I have a couple questions because I'm not clear. What is the PIAA standard? Like, what does that equate to in the GPA realm? Does it get you even graduated in the state? Do you earn your diploma with the bare minimum from the PIAA? What are we doing to help these kids now that are currently falling below? And yeah, the rest were already asked, so if you could, that's my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Mr. Ravesti?
Randy's coming down. Anybody else?
No pressure, Randy, no pressure.
Pressure, no notes, no nothing. My name's Randy Ravesti. I am a proud Gateway alumni. That's why I'm back here. I played on the first championship team. I was probably the worst player on the team, but I still played and competed. This is not about academics and activities. The standards are the standards. You know, a teacher should, if we were going to lower the standards, we would tell all our teachers, don't give our students anything lower than a C. We don't want to do that. We want to continue to strive where they have to work to maintain and work hard. So I'm all for academics. I went to William & Mary, if anybody knows about that. You either have to be extremely bright or play football, so you can guess how I got in. But at the end of the day, I've taught, I've coached. I was a middle school principal for a long time. I was director of student activities and transportation for a longer time. And the most important thing in today's society is social skills, getting along with people. You know, in my day, everybody in Mellon Plan, Boyd Hill, when you graduated from high school, if you graduated from high school, you worked in a mill. Those opportunities aren't there. Most of the world now, you have to be social. You gain social skills by belonging to an activity. And it's not about football. It's not about the other sports. It's about a kid having the opportunity to enjoy all the Gateway has to offer. You know, I love the band. You know, the school I was at before, I loved the band. Those kids work extremely hard. They're very proud. They're together. Years from now, they'll talk about their positive experiences. Someone mentioned Coach Anna Marino. You know, all those experiences that weren't positive, we love and we talk about today. So I think we're talking about a number of different things. I've heard different people say, okay, it's how we compute it. And I've been saying, you know, that's wrong. And someone said it well, if you get a lot of high C's, there's still a C. And if you get one bad grade, it ruins your time here. I'm not a fan of the PIAA minimum requirements. I think you should be working towards graduation. Can everybody hear me when I'm not talking into this thing?
Yeah.
You should be working to graduate. Now, I believe this from a young age when I taught that each kid is gifted in something. It might not be math, it might not be English, it might not be class. I have a cousin who couldn't multiply 2 times 2, but he can look at a fenced-in concrete thing and he can tell you it's 2.5 yards needs to go in there. He just knows that stuff. There are other people who tear cars apart and put them back together, but they struggled here, and they've all made more money than I've made in my lifetime. There's a lot of different ways to make a living. One of the things that I believe with all my heart is that a mentor, a coach, a club person has the ability to make an effect, a positive effect on somebody who may not get that. You know, when I had the bright kids, that's easy. I didn't have to do anything. They achieved on their own. The ones I took great joy in was getting kids back in that day when I taught physical science, just to have them bring the book to class. And then the next step is to have them open it sometime and not sleep. You know, but it's a struggle. When I was an assistant principal, I had parents come in and sit across from me and say, you know, I don't know what to do. Can you help me? We've taken them to Hunting Learning Center. We've taken them here, taken them there, tutors. you know, they just don't get it. And some kids just don't get it. And before I go any further,
Yes,
that
George
was a
wants
great
on.
job. Very nice.
George.
Very proud of you. Also, before I forget, Coach Hall texted me, and he wanted everybody to know that he was speaking on behalf of a lot of the families for football. He asked them to stay away because he wanted to keep it professional, and he is a professional man. But I think, and I look back at my high school team, WPL championships. We had guys that achieved very well. We had guys who didn't. But all of them went on and found success in life. And I think a lot of it had to do with Coach Betts, Coach Hanley, Coach Klippa, who is a Serbian. Turn that thing off, please. Coach Klippa's no longer here, but I used to get more kisses from him than I got from my wife later in the year because he was such an influence on my life. All my coaches, all my teachers, South Junior High, for you guys who might remember that, it's not about lowering the standards. It's about getting kids involved so they have some positive experience coming out of here. And we had kids last year who were ineligible half the time, but they're in the Army. You know, and if you can go to the Army, you should be able to join a band, or you should be able to shoot a basketball, or you should be able to do some things. I would like to see, and this is just me because you asked me to talk, that we do away with this now and form a committee to look at what would be in the best interest of all the kids, the bright kids and the low achievers. And if we have to spend money to get people tutored, let's do it. You know, I wasn't prepared, and I apologize. I ramble, but I do believe in each and every kid has some special qualities. And if we kick the ones that can't meet the academic standards, you know, I think shame on us. There are a lot of good kids who have given up, and maybe have given up coming to school just for some simple fact because they couldn't belong to the chess club if we have one, or something like that. Can I take any questions on athletics? Or it's not about athletics. You know, I could care less if, well, I could care. We've won 2 championships last year. We got great coaches in place. They're great role models. That's what you want. We got great teachers. I was a principal. I walked down the hall when Dr. Short was the principal, and I coached him at some football camps way back. Our teachers teach from bell to bell. Classrooms are open. They're demanding, as they should be. And like I said, my thing, if we are lowering academic standards, we should do away with all extracurricular activities. That shouldn't even be thought about. What should be thought about is we're going to continue our AP classes. We're going to make kids work. The best coach that I had as far as academics was Mr. Hoffman. He's dead. He was my baseball coach. I come in there, you know, I'm a bright kid, and holy heck, he's making me work. What's wrong with this guy, you know? When I got to college, he was the guy that prepared me the most. We want teachers that are going to be demanding. We want teachers that are going to keep after kids. But we also have to understand that not everybody is going to fully able to achieve that. We want them working towards those goals, but some just can't do it, and those are the ones that are going to be left behind. That No Child Left Behind was the worst thing they came out with because everybody wasn't created equal. Idealistically, it was a great concept, but at the end of the day, it was a big failure. So anyway, I listened to all the thoughts. I thought they were all great. It's okay to disagree, but it's never okay to become disagreeable. I hope we could come to some type of solution that would be in the best interest of all kids. And that's, I know as a school board member, I know that's your motto. We're going to do what's right by kids. As parents, we should do what's right by kids. And if I offended anybody with my thoughts, I apologize. But I am definitely for academics. I'm for social skills for kids. I'm for kids belonging to something. So I'm going to be on TV. My hair's not combed because I don't have any hair. And But I thank you for your time, and I talked too long. And Bonnie, I was just kidding about turning that off. Any questions?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Randy.
Anybody else wish to address the board on agenda items? George?
I'd like to speak on this agenda item, if possible.
Lene, I think you're the only one left.
You didn't speak, Lene.
You good?
George would like to speak.
Am I allowed?
Yeah, it's Mary.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to thank you all, for coming. It shows us you are concerned as I am. I made a promise to myself and the people of my district, foremost to the students, that was to always work for you and the betterment of the district. You know not everyone will play in the NFL or skate at the arena. Not everyone will be a National Honor Society candidate. This, in fact, and we all know it, but for some kids, sports at this level may be the only chance they will have to challenge themselves and their abilities to inspire their dreams, if only 4 years at the high school level. Our school activities teach teamwork, leadership, friendship, and the drive to strive for personal goals that will hopefully carry on to the future. We only want the best for our children. This is why it's so distressing to have the verbal attacks that are going on against my colleague and friend, Ms. Val Warning. As chair and spokesman of the policy committee, she recommended a policy change of 2.0 to the PIA rules for student athletics. After much discussion on the matter, it was agreed upon by the rest of the committee, myself, Mr. McIntyre, and Dr. Schwartz, a few opinions. Years ago, we had an AD football coach who was recruiting players for out of the district. That's when the 2.0 went into effect. It was also disgusting the 200-plus media hits Mrs. Warning received with also her family after a post from a past board member. His calculations in dispute were wrong. It didn't figure out to be a 0.55, but it was higher, but it's higher to the PIAA standings. With that wrong statement, it brought people on his bandwagon to belittle her and her family for her statement as a chairperson. Again, due to lies by a few and followed by many, it started this disgraceful situation. But how dare people compare Gateway with Wilkinsburg, which is no more? By making that statement, or surrounding districts like that honor the PIAA rules, like Franklin, Norwin, Penn Trafford, Plum. I can go on. There's 26 of them in our surrounding areas. Are you showing them there like Wilkinsburg too? I think the biggest problem is what mandated by the state. It lets Gateway and every other school graduate a student with a 1.0 or D average to graduate and get a diploma. With us going with the PIA standards, they are higher than a 1.0. So tell me how we are showing favoritism to the athletes by expecting to achieve more. We expect that from our students by helping, counseling, and encouraging them to achieve their own level of learning and success to the best of their ability. I will always be fair. I will always help a student to succeed. I will always give a second chance, and I always look for the good in the kid and would rather see him in playing with a ball or a bat in their hands than running the streets. We have the ability to make or break a future. I say we strive to make it. Lastly, I know a few board members and citizens are opposed to me and Mrs. Warning for upholding the Gateway pride. Unlike previous boards using a baby spoon to scrape the surface to find the truth in some answers. Me and Miss Warning, for some reason, we came together. I thought she was, well, I didn't really know her at the beginning, but she speaks from her heart. If we have to, we'll come in using a backhoe if necessary. Wait, I got some statistics here, and these ain't athletes. Maybe 20% of them are athletes. Grade 10, the total number of students below a 2.0, 63. Grade 11, below 2.0 is 39. Grade 12, 44. Grand total of 156 students. Maybe 10% of them are athletes. The rest of them, I don't know what happened. But thank you for your time.
Did you say ninth grade?
Ninth grade, we didn't have ninth grade. Pardon me? 10th, 11th, and 12th, ma'am. I'm sorry. If you need it, I'll get it for you.
No, I have a ninth grader, so I was just curious.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Scotty.
All right, thank you, George.